Please stand with me as we worship.
Rejoiced as though heaven had lost. But then Jesus arose with our freedom in hand. That's when death was arrested and my life began. So free, washes over me.
Welcome, everybody. I know the worship team looks a little bit different today. This is actually Student-Led Sunday, and we're all very excited to have you here. So please worship with us as we sing today.
Spoke creation, God of heaven knew our names. Formed in His reflection, we are His glory on display. And His heart is good, He's always kind. With the cross He proved He's on my side. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. No matter where we go, we're close to the Father's heart. Though we stumble, He will not let us fall. We are the Lord's, and He will never forsake His own. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. His love He lavished on us and called us children of the King. And in His loving kindness, He chose the lowly and the weak. And His heart is good, He's always kind. With the cross He proved He's on my side. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. No matter where we go, we're close to the Father's heart. Though we stumble, He will not let us fall. We are the Lord's, and He will never forsake His own. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. The lies speak louder than the truth. Remind me I belong to You. When I can't see past the dark of night, We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. No matter where we go, we're close to the Father's heart. And though we stumble, He will not let us fall. We are the Lord's, and He will never forsake His own. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God.
For all who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery, leading again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit Himself bears witness to our spirit that we are all God's children. If we are children, then heirs, namely heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ.
This is my prayer in the desert, when all that's within me feels dry. This is my prayer in my hunger and need. My God is the God who provides. This is my prayer in the fire, in weakness or trial or pain. There is a faith proven more worth than gold, so refine me, Lord, through the flame. I will bring praise, I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice, I will declare, God is my victory and He is here. This is my prayer in the battle, when triumph is still on its way. I am a conqueror and co-heir with Christ, so firm on His promise I'll stand. I will bring praise, I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice, I will declare, God is my victory and He is here. All of my life, in every season, You are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season, You are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season, You are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season, You are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. I will bring praise, I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice, I will declare, God is my victory and He is here. This is my prayer in the harvest, when favor and providence flow. Oh no, I'm filled to be emptied again. The seed I've received, I will sow.
Father God, we come before you today in a spirit of worship. We come before you in a spirit of passion for your love and your mercy and your grace. Father, I ask that you would just come into this room with your love and that you would touch every heart of us in here. You hear the whispers of our heart every night and every day, and today is no different. Together we sing and we praise you, and I would just ask that you would just watch over us. As we come to the altar today, in thankfulness, seeking forgiveness, and seeking the love of the Father in heaven. Thank you for your Son and his redeeming blood. Amen.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Mercy has saved my soul. Now the freedom is all I know. The old made new. Jesus, when I met you, you called my name. Then I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy. The chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the
name is Leah, and I'd just like to welcome you to Student Led Sunday. If this is your first time here, we'd like to extend a special welcome to you and ask that you would grab a communication card from the seat pocket in front of you, fill it out, and you can put it in the wooden box at the back of the sanctuary at the end of the service, or go to the Welcome Center and hand it to our pastor or one of our elders, and they have a special gift for you that they just love to give you. Next on our list is Entry Point, and if you are wanting to become a member or you're interested in just knowing more about Crosspoint, this is definitely for you. It's on April 29th from 4 to 6:30. There'll be a light meal provided, and you can just talk to our pastor and learn more about the church. And lastly, the month of April, we are collecting regular-sized cans of fruit, and there are crates at the back as you're about to exit that are nicely labeled, and you can just put those in there, and those are going to benefit the local community food pantry. Thank you.
All right, good morning. Good morning. It's good to be here with you. My name is Justin Hamby. I'm the student minister here, and I'm proud to be a part of this thing called student ministry at Crosspoint. Didn't these students do a wonderful job this morning leading it? These students are also leading us in life groups today and teaching in various areas this morning. They greeted you this morning as well as took up the offering. And so, again, happy to be a part of leading you, and I appreciate you allowing us the opportunity to lead in this thing called Student Led Sunday. Well, this morning, I wanted to share this with you. I've had in my head for quite a while now this idea of the compassion of Jesus, and this stems out of Mark chapter 6, and the story actually comes just before the feeding of the 5,000. So go ahead and turn to Mark chapter 6. I invite you to turn there. And I again, want to share with you a little bit of my heart, what this verse has meant to me here recently, and how this verse has kept reoccurring. Well, this morning, again, it's good to be with you all. So 2 years ago, we were preparing for this thing called Student Led Sunday, and we had our firstborn son, Caden, just 9 days prior, and so we had to get a guest speaker in here to cover kind of last minute. And truth be told, we are expecting our second child in just another 3 weeks. And so Caden came 4 weeks early, and so leading up to this point, I was a little nervous, thank you. I'm excited, but I got to get past noon today, and then all will be well. So there's a little bit of nerves going into this, but again, I'm happy to be with you this morning, and I'm glad to share this with you today. So if you would join me in reading Mark chapter 6, we're going to read verses 30 to 34. The apostles gathered together around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while." For many people were coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they went away in the boat by themselves to a remote place. But many saw them leaving and recognized them, and ran on foot from around all of the towns and arrived ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd and had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Then he began to teach them many things. Let's pray together. Father God, I come before you and pray over your word. Father, I pray that through this passage we might see something, Lord, that you might convict us of something as well. And Father, I thank you for this gift called compassion, this compassion that you first showed to us. And Father, I ask again, as we look at your word, Lord, through your Spirit, I ask that you would help us to model Jesus, to follow what he did already, Father, so that we might extend compassion to others. So speak. This is your time. It's all these things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So again, here's the setting of this passage. So this comes right before this major story that I'm sure you're aware of called the feeding of the 5,000. And so Jesus finds himself with his disciples on one side of the Sea of Galilee and says these words, "Let us retreat. Let us go find some rest." The scriptures tell us that they were getting bombarded by all of these people coming and wanting more from Jesus, wanting healing, wanting to see miracles, wanting to even hear his teaching. And so Jesus says, we've got to take a break. And so he says to the disciples, let's get in the boat, let's cross the Sea of Galilee. And while they do this, it says the crowds followed them on foot. So the Sea of Galilee was approximately 4 miles from where they first put into the water and got out on the other side. And these crowds ran 10 miles around the outside to catch them on the other side. And so this is the setting, and in fact, this is what leads to the feeding of the 5,000. But this morning, I want us to focus in specifically on verse 34. I want us to see how Jesus took 3 simple steps and exhibited this amazing ability to show compassion. In fact, I'd like to think of this as Jesus having this compassion reflex. When he sees the crowd, when he feels what they're going through, when he later engages, it all happens in one snapshot in verse 34. Now, the Bible actually uses a unique word in the Greek here for the compassion that Jesus had. In fact, it's only used in the New Testament to describe this compassion that Jesus has. And so the title of the lesson this morning goes like this. It's the compassion of the Christ. And I hope that through this morning, we'll catch a glimpse of what Jesus did. Again, Jesus saw, he felt, and he engaged the needs of others. So let's dive in here. First and foremost, Jesus saw the needs of others. This sounds like such a simple and obvious step, but Mark includes it in this verse to say Jesus saw the crowds. If we miss this, we miss the rest of it. In fact, this sounds semi-reminiscent of what happened to Moses while God was speaking through the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3. God, through the burning bush, says to Moses, I have seen the sufferings of Israel. I've heard their cries for help. In fact, I know their afflictions. This is the same God in the flesh in Jesus, and when he sees the crowds, he sees what's going on. He sees the pain. He sees the suffering. He hears these cries for help, and in fact, without a trigger, there can be no compassion reflex. And so it all starts here, and it sounds, again, obvious, but you couldn't possibly answer your phone without hearing it ring, without feeling it vibrate, without seeing it from across the room. It all starts with this sight. Now, there's some very real tendencies we have to overlook from the get-go the needs of other people. And so I want to walk through those real quick. The first and foremost of this is our focus. And sometimes this happens unintentionally. Sometimes our focus is good. Our focus is on good things. Our focus can almost be like a laser or like a horse with blinders on, to where we can't see what's going on to the left or to the right, where we might miss an opportunity for compassion. Again, this could be intentionally done or not. We would be remiss if we talked about a story of compassion and didn't bring up our friend, the beggar on the side of the road at the intersection, right? When we think about pulling up to that intersection, there's some times where in all reality, there could be something going on in the back seat behind you. If you've got kids, there could be something legitimately that draws your attention away from that person just outside your window. But so often, we find something else to look at, right? It's uncomfortable to us to see this person in need and desperation. And so it used to be the radio, right? You would turn and adjust your radio. Well, now it might be that email you need to check or that text message you might need to send. But realize, if our focus is on ourselves, good things or not, if it's intentional or unintentional, we can flat miss what's going on around us. Jesus very well could have used this excuse. In fact, if you look back earlier in the chapter, early in Mark chapter 6, you'll see Jesus has just sent out his disciples. And when they rally back together in verse 30 and verse 31, Jesus is trying to teach them and to debrief them after the ministry they've done. Jesus was an excellent coach, and he wanted to speak with his disciples and have time to digest what was going on and hear the reports of what these guys did out in the world. What did they learn? What did they see? And Jesus, again, wanted to coach and equip these guys. And so part of his initial idea, his initial inspiration to get away was to talk with them, was to debrief, but we're told the crowds kept coming, wave after wave of people. And Jesus said, we've got to get away. We have to take this chance. And Jesus had this goal of perpetuating the ministry, of equipping his disciples, and he very well could have used this as an excuse. But we're told when he gets off the boat, he sees these crowds and it interrupts him. And so often, God wants to use the unexpected, the interruptions, the things that we didn't plan on as a moment for us to share compassion. And Jesus took that moment, but he easily could have missed it. Next, Jesus very well could have also used this excuse. Sometimes in our life, and there are certainly seasons where we are going through so much on our own, it's hard for us to extend compassion to others. Again, right before Jesus gets in the boat with the disciples to go find rest, we're told the story of John the Baptist's assassination. We're told that this man that baptized Jesus, this man related both by blood and by spirit, who leapt in the womb of Elizabeth when Jesus, also in the womb of Mary, approached, these two that shared a bond, John has just been beheaded. John has been killed. Jesus says, let's go find some rest. And I can't help but think Jesus is grieving. Jesus is suffering right now. He wants to get away. He needs a chance to breathe, to process, to think, and to work through this experience of John the Baptist and his death. He gets off the boat, and he sees the crowds, and even in the midst of his own grief, Jesus is willing to engage. But it first starts with that sight, and Jesus could have been blinded to that by his own grief, but he overcame that. And last, there's this idea of comfort and convenience. Again, Jesus, all he wanted in this moment was to find some rest. In fact, the Bible tells us in verse 31 that there were so many people coming and asking and making these requests of Jesus and the disciples that they didn't even have time to eat. They couldn't sit down and share a meal together. They were constantly interrupted. And so Jesus just wanted rest, just wanted to get away. So often it's our comfort and our convenience that just flat says, you know what? I would just rather focus on that. If I can just go take my break or find some relief, maybe I don't have to get my hands dirty with this thing called compassion. We can be blinded by our own comfort and our own convenience. So we have to, absolutely have to, first and foremost, we have to ask God for a new set of eyes, a new ability to see and be aware of what's going on in the lives of other people around us. About 10 years ago, a man named Brandon Heath, I absolutely love this song, wrote a song called Give Me Your Eyes. You may be familiar with this song. If not, I encourage you to go listen to it and look it up and maybe turn the song into a prayer. In fact, this song is a prayer, and it's this message of God, help me to see the things I've never seen before. God, help me to see the hurts and the needs of other people. Help me to be attuned to that in a way that I've never been before. In fact, help me to have the eyes that you have. Help me to be aware and to be sensitive, maybe have a new perspective on what other people are going through. So let's make that our prayer. Next, after Jesus saw the needs of the crowd, he internalized them. He felt them. Verse 34, this is a pivotal point in this verse, but Jesus says, or the Bible tells us, that Jesus saw the crowds and had compassion on them. Now, this thing called compassion works out to be defined like this. It literally means to suffer with. It means to feel the hurts and pains of others as if they were your own. So Jesus had to recognize and understand and realize and take those on himself, the sufferings and the pains that this crowd, this audience was going through. And so he sensed his condition, the condition of this group of people. The Bible tells us he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Church, this grieved Jesus. It hurt him. See, sheep without a shepherd are those that are without protection. They have no one truly fighting for them, no one truly on their side looking out for their own best interests. They have no basic provisions. If we were to think about Psalm 23, that beautiful, beautiful psalm, we think about God leading his people by still waters and leading them to green pastures, and his rod and staff giving comfort because of the protection that he offers. And this crowd, this group of people, had none of that. And Jesus saw that, and it hurt him in a way that he took the needs of these people and he took it personally. In fact, in John 10, Jesus uses this metaphor to describe himself. He says, I am the good shepherd. He wears this as a point of pride that he is the one who has come to give direction, to give provision, to offer protection to this group of people. And he sees they're without that they're lacking, and they're afflicted because of it. You could even go so far as to maybe equate this compassion reflex that Jesus felt almost to an allergic reaction. See, first, Jesus got close enough to pick up on these allergens, to see the things, the hurts, the pains that were coming off of this crowd. Next, when he took them on, when he allowed himself to feel those, he had a reaction. There was a sense of discomfort that welled up within them, this itching, burning sensation, and Jesus had to do something about it. There has to be a reaction. So Jesus first saw, then he felt, and next he engaged the needs of other people. The book of Mark in verse 34 tells us that his reaction to these people, his engagement to these people, was to teach them truth, was to teach them many things. If you were to turn to Matthew or John's accounts, you would see that Jesus also healed their sick. He saw that need. He felt the pain, and he healed their sick. If you were to turn to Luke's account of the feeding of 5,000, Luke even says both of these things, but takes it a step further. It says he welcomed these people who interrupted him. These people who threw him off of his schedule, his intentions. Jesus welcomed them. He engaged them. See, so he met the needs. If you were to look even just a few verses later, starting in verse 35, you would see the story of the feeding of the 5,000 unfold. He saw their need, and he met their need in a way of food and provision. He also met their physical needs through healing. Then he met a spiritual understanding, a need that they had. Now, I want you to notice here, when Jesus teaches truth, compassion does not mean compromising on truth. And catch that this morning. Compassion does not mean compromising or watering down truth. In fact, so often when we first extend compassion, it allows us the opportunity to speak difficult truth into the lives of others. That's what Jesus did. In fact, if you were to continue in John's account of the feeding of the 5,000, we're told that the day after, the same thing happens where Jesus gets back in the boat, or actually he starts walking on water to cross back over the Sea of Galilee, and this whole thing reverses. The crowds run from one side of the sea back to the other where they began to go meet Jesus. And when they meet Jesus this time, Jesus says, "Stop it. Quit coming and asking me for free food. In fact, you need to eat me, the bread from heaven." It's hard truth. This offended the crowd. They said, "Well, just continue giving us free stuff." And Jesus said, "Absolutely not. What you see is all that you need. Accept me, trust me, believe in me, and that's it." And the Jews revolted. So many of them cried out, "Isn't this the son of Mary and Joseph? The same son that we've heard all of this talk about? How can he be really from heaven?" And Dr. Gregory shared that with us last week. There's a skepticism to say, well, who is Jesus really? That truth is going to be hard for some people to hear. Next, there's a sense that even his closest followers, his disciples, struggled with this. They said, "Jesus, who can hear this teaching? This is tough stuff. It's hard for even us to understand. You want us to eat you?" They struggled. Jesus spoke hard truth after showing compassion. So note that this morning. Next, Jesus engaged at great expense. We talked through the possible excuses Jesus could have had. Jesus could have done any number of things to say, "Not right now. We need this rest. We have to eat. We have to continue in the ministry. I have to rest. But Jesus engaged despite these costs. 11 days ago marked the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King, April 4th, 1964. Reading through an article about him, I learned something new. I didn't realize this about what led up to his actual assassination. See, just before the assassination, Martin Luther King Jr. was on the trail to Washington, D.C. to organize what was called the Poor People's Campaign. They were going to petition and rally in Washington, D.C. so that there might be some legislation changes, some things made, some national attention drawn to this desperate need for people to gain some help, to come out of poverty, to live a better life. We learned about this event going on in Memphis, Tennessee. This thing called the garbage truck, or the garbage collector strike. And out of a sense of compassion, he rerouted. He said, instead of going on to Washington, D.C., I'm going to stop by Memphis, Tennessee first. I'm going out of my way to meet with these people. His heart was to help and better other people. He was a man driven by compassion. And instead of following his own agenda, he went out of the way, and he finds himself on the balcony at 6:01, April 4th, 1968. 6:01, getting ready for dinner, and be met with a bullet from an escaped convict named James Earl Gray, willing to pay his life. That's compassion. And that's what we are called to be when engaging other people. It's the way Jesus engaged us. With great compassion, Jesus went to the cross. With great feeling and seeing our condition, Jesus went to the cross. Church, that's the call for us this morning, is to give of ourselves in such a selfless way. Now, certainly this call to compassion applies to all people. It applies to those who know Jesus and those who don't. It applies to every demographic, every possible grouping of people that you could think of. But being Youth Sunday, I want us to bring this story in a different direction. I want us to think about how Jesus would have compassion on this group of people called the next generation. Now, I don't think it's too hard of a stretch for us to imagine this crowd representing this next generation, because like this crowd, this generation moved fast, were lost and confused, and forgot to pack a lunch. So I want us to see this morning and spend the rest of our focus how Jesus would show compassion on this group of people called Generation Z. The Generation Z represents those people born after or somewhere in the mid-90s to the early 2000s, right at the 2000 mark. And I, for one, am really excited because myself being a millennial, I'm really excited that we can name this generation and start blaming stuff on them, right? So I feel like we've gotten a really short end of this deal that millennials have been thrown under the bus for a lot of things. But truthfully, that would be an inappropriate response to this group. And in fact, that would keep us from offering compassion. We'll come back to that here in just a moment. But this group called Gen Z, see, they're living under speeds, and life is moving in a way that has never moved before in human history. There's so much speed, so much quickness, so much acceleration happening in their life. And it's happening at a daily, monthly rate. There's a guy I really, really appreciate, and you'll hear quite a few things from him, but Dr. Tim Elmore is a man that has done a lot of research on several generations previously, and he's just written another book. And so some of what I would like to share comes out of there, but another author puts it this way, that this group, this generation, is living in an age of acceleration. Everything constantly is getting faster and faster and faster. And again, it's something this world has never seen. Now, if you will allow me to walk through this metaphor for how different these generations are growing up, a metaphor for the speed of life. In his song Ramblin' Man by Greg Allman, and yes, I'm a millennial and I know who Greg Allman is of the Allman Brothers. But the song, the main character in the song Ramblin' Man is said to have been born in the back seat of a, anybody know? Greyhound bus rolling down Highway 41. Close, Highway 41. Born in the back seat of a Greyhound bus rolling down Highway 41. Now, let's suppose that this was actually Greg Allman himself, or maybe a group of people, his generation, the baby boomers, born in 1947. So let's assume that. And I want you to consider what the song lyrics might be of someone born in the year 2000, some 60 years later. I would argue that it might go something like this. I was born in the International Space Station, orbiting Earth at 17,000 miles an hour. Let's compare and contrast these two. You see, this bus is a metaphor for life moving at a slower and steadier pace. This bus is a metaphor for multiple stops, for having moments where there's some downtime. Things aren't changing as rapidly. Innovation is happening in spurts, but there are stops to break that up. And on this bus, you would also be surrounded by this thing called community. Like them or not, know them or not, there was a sense of oneness, this sense of we're in this thing together because we have no other choice to be. We're stuck together. Compare that to someone who might be born in the space station. They're surrounded by a high-tech environment, instruments and technology totally encompassing them. They're hurling through the universe. In fact, they're orbiting Earth every 90 minutes. A full revolution around the Earth every 90 minutes. And that's how information comes at these students. In fact, from the perspective of the space station, the world looks a lot smaller. It feels smaller. But one of the greatest tragedies of all of this is being born in the space station. There's this tendency to feel isolated, to feel alone. And so much of Gen Z, despite being connected, despite seeing the world on a larger scale and having information coming at them and living at this speed where everybody is connected to everything all the time, they feel alone. And they wrestle with this daily. And so first I want you to hear this. This generation was born into this speed. They jumped onto this treadmill at full speed, and it wasn't their choice. So much of the speed generated has been done by my generation, by your generation, the desire to be quicker in business, for entertainment to be instant. All of this has happened, and it's put these students, this group called Gen Z, right in the middle of it. So they move fast. But these students, this group called Gen Z, is also lost, and they need direction. You see, when Jesus saw the crowds in Mark chapter 6, he looked at them and saw that they were sheep without a shepherd. They don't have a leader, generally speaking. They don't have a leader. They need help, and in fact, they're trying to figure this world out. Don't tell me they're not, but they're struggling. They don't know how to deal with all of these things coming at them 24/7, and they're needing a guide. In fact, Dr. Tim Elmore, in his new book called Marching Off the Map, addresses this need. He says these students, this group called Gen Z, is marching into uncharted territory, and they're trying to use old maps to make sense of a new world. This world is uncharted. And one of the tools we have to give this new generation, one thing they have to have, is this thing called a compass of truth. One that points to true north. One that gives them a true sense of directions at all time. God's Word, the Holy Spirit, gives these timeless truths that apply to any situation. But right now, so many of them are struggling because they don't have the tools they need to navigate. And last, this group forgot their lunch. Mark chapter 6, again, marks the beginning of the story that unfolds that we're so familiar with, the story of the feeding of 5,000. And all of these people get to a point where they have no food, and collectively this whole group has made simple mistakes. Realize teenagers are still teenagers. Their landscape may look different. The world they're living in may operate at a different speed. They're still going to make teenage mistakes. They're going to make simple and avoidable and what were you thinking kind of mistakes. Part of compassion, part of our response has to be to see these teenagers are still teenagers. They may have different tools in their hand. I won't divulge too much. It was Dean. But this week we had conversation in our office. One of Dean's lines, and he might actually not appreciate this, but I'm going to tell it anyway. One of the things Dean made the comment about was, I was a little reckless when I was 15 on a motorcycle riding down a country lane. I'm surprised I made it. And I'm glad Dean's here today. Realize teenagers will make teenage mistakes. I'm not saying that's okay or that we shouldn't offer correction or help coach them. But hear me in this. There will be simple mistakes made. It may look a little bit different. It may not be a motorcycle or a car that they're making dumb mistakes with. It may look more like a cell phone. They will make dumb mistakes. And so continue in this idea of compassion by seeing that they will forget their lunch. So how do we engage this generation? I want to wrap us up with talking about the how. How do we do this for this new generation? And first is to see them. So simple. We have to see them. We have to get close enough to see them. Realize that this group called Gen Z, despite all of our other thoughts about them, they're still human. Realize they're not a new species with technology permanently embedded in that hand or wires coming in or out of them. They are still human. Realize that a simple way to view this new generation is to step back in time and view them even as you were as a teenager. Think of what it was like growing up as a teenager. Realize in order to see them, we have to be in proximity to them. We have to get close enough to see them. I realize some of you in this room are in the middle of this thing called parenting a teenager. You may be hiding from your teenager, and I get that, and that's a natural response. But put yourself around them. Get close enough to feel. If we're comparing this thing called compassion, this compassion reflex to an allergic reaction, we have to get close enough to feel. Now, every once in a while, God's going to cause the wind to blow 40 miles an hour the way it has the past few days. And he's going to blow things your way, and you're going to be sensitive to something you never expected to be sensitive to. But on a day-to-day basis, get close enough to expose yourself, to see the needs of these people, of this generation. Next, you have to feel their lostness and confusion. And this one requires proximity all the same. Get close enough. Start asking the questions. Start gaining new understanding. Again, we have this word only describing Jesus' unique compassion. We don't have the same ability to see the hearts and minds of these students the way Jesus did and the way Jesus does. We have to force ourselves to get closer. I want to share with you, if compassion is truly an allergic reaction, there are several things that can act as antihistamines to block those things, to keep us from feeling the result of this reaction. So judgment and stereotypes would be a couple of those. They block our ability to feel compassion. I want to read a quote for you. The world is passing through troublesome times. The young people of today think of nothing but themselves. They have no reverence for parents or old age. They are impatient of all restraint. They talk as if they know everything, and what passes for wisdom with us is foolishness to them. Sounds like something you could read in the newspaper today. This quote is attributed to a priest named Paul the Hermit from the year 1274. Catch that? 750 years ago. 1274. every single generation since there has been this thing called generations has used the quote, kids these days. Every single one. Think back to Adam and Eve. I couldn't imagine looking at the first ever new generation and Adam and Eve looking at their kids going, why the envy? Why the jealousy? Why the rage? Why the violence? Every generation has said this about the new generation. And hear me, we miss it. We miss the opportunity to feel compassion when we have this calloused attitude, this calloused view of this new generation. Realize, too, as we talked about earlier, this group, this Gen Z, is victim of the speed that they're born into. That's not to say we don't give direction, that we don't reprimand, or that by any means they get a free pass for how to use this thing called technology. But understand, they didn't choose it. They're trying to figure this out. They're born on the space station trying to make sense of it all. My generation, millennials, we've had some time to adapt. I remember distinctly going from dial-up to high speed, and that was a glorious day. We didn't have to fight over the phone line anymore. You didn't have to wait for that annoying noise, but every once in a while I miss it. Do you? Just kidding. We went from dial-up to high speed in our house, and then there was this other crazy phenomenon called Wi-Fi, and all of a sudden you didn't have to be at a desk, at a computer, plugged in. You could roam around your house, and that was cool. Then I remember the day I got a smartphone, and all of a sudden at speeds that would blow everything out of the water. Previously, today, you can access anything and everything, and millennials have had time to adjust. You who are a little older than millennials have had time to grow into this thing and adjust to it. These students have not. And so they're diving headfirst into this. This is also the first generation that doesn't have to go to adults to get information. And this one's important. I remember also growing up, we had these things called current event projects. And that meant I had to go home that night and ask my parents, where's the newspaper? Has it been thrown out yet? I need it. I got to have it. Teacher said. These students don't have to go to an adult for information. And so how in the world do we engage a generation that has all the information you could possibly want at their fingertips? In this case, engaging them looks like teaching them. Just like Jesus did. We teach them. And we teach them timeless truths. See, we have to give context to the content. They're going to get that content. We have to teach them a framework for how to see it, how to view the world. What is a Christian response? What is a Christian philosophy towards all of these things? We have to teach the truth. And don't be surprised to know, and don't think for a second that they're not. This generation is actually seeking truth. They want it. The human condition, they crave to know what is true, but right now they're hearing so many different voices. Teach them truth. Point them to Christ. Next, to engage them, we have to, absolutely have to, sacrifice. We have to give of ourselves in a way that we might be able to show compassion at all costs. So I want you to think this morning. I'm going to ask our praise team to come back up, and as we go into a time of reflection, I want you to think about these questions. Is there a breakdown in your communication reflex? Do you find yourself seeing people but maybe not feeling deeply in a way for them? Do you find yourself maybe feeling the pains of other people but not making a full connection to engage with them? What's stopping you? Is there a breakdown to where even maybe your focus, maybe your goals, your drive, your motivation, intentional or not, is blocking you from even seeing the hurts and pains of those around you? What needs to change? I want to ask if you are willing to take the step to better live out the compassion of the Christ. Will you do it with groups like this new generation? They need it. Let's pray together. Father, I simply ask this morning, help us to show compassion the way you showed compassion. Help us to love the way you love. I pray that you would give us new eyes that would see the hurts of those around us. I ask that you would give us a new tenderness of heart, Lord, that we might feel the hurts of those around us. Father, I pray that you would help us to boldly, selflessly give of ourselves to engage this group. I do pray for this new generation. I trust that you have something great in mind for them and that you are working in their midst right now. And Father, I humbly ask for myself and these involved here. God, help us to do that better. Father, again, I pray that you help us to show compassion the way that you've showed us compassion. In your Son, Jesus' name we pray.
Like the rushing wind, would you breathe within my heart? Through the raging storm, would you hold me in your arms? I need you. Oh, I need you. I need your love like I need water. I need your love like I need breath inside my lungs, burning my heart just like a fire. Come and take me over. Jesus, draw me closer to your heart. Through the wind and rain, I can hear you call my name. When the nights get rough, I will still sing out your praise. 'Cause I need you. How I need you. I need your love like I need water. I need your love like I need breath inside my lungs, burning my heart just like a fire. Come and take me over. Jesus, draw me closer to your heart, your heart, your heart. Closer than my every breath, closer than my every step, closer than the song I sing, closer than anything, closer than my every breath, closer than my every step, closer than the song I sing, closer than anything. I need your love like I need water. I need your love like I need breath inside my lungs, burning my heart just like a fire. Come and take me over. Jesus, draw me closer. I need your
morning, I want to share with you too, Mark 6:34, one of the beauties of this verse is that it's the gospel. It's Jesus showing compassion for each and every one of us. And if you have never experienced the compassion that Jesus offers, the forgiveness that Jesus offers, I invite you, come talk with us in the Welcome Center out and to your left. I would love to help you if you're struggling with that or questioning that. We would also love to meet you out there. I'd like to take just a moment to say thank you to this group of teenagers behind me, those teaching in the life groups. Y'all give them a big round of applause. They have worked hard, and I hope it shows, but I also want to point out someone who works incredibly hard with these teenagers, Mr. James Truen at the back, right in front of the sound booth. James works with our students to teach them and prepare them to do the awesome things that they've done on the stage today and lead on Wednesday. Mr. David Simkovsky as well is here as well, late on Sundays and early on Wednesdays. And so if you see those two guys or see these students, give them a high five, say thanks this morning. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to lead you today, and thank you for allowing students to as well. Go in compassion. Thank you all. You're dismissed.